Anxiety really messes with our ability to learn anything. And it messes with our ability to live our lives. So let's explore just a couple of the basics around how anxiety comes about and a couple of things that we can do about it. There's much more to be found in our Learn to Learn podcast we'll mention later. Anxiety is a result of how we view ourselves and how we view what's coming up in our future. The most basic thing is that we perceive ourselves as being small relative to whatever it is that we're anxious about. We have so often a sense of the test, the interview, the whatever it is we're trying to get done sort of looming above us. And we're small in comparison. And in being small, we have this sense of limited capacity. When we get small in ourselves, whatever brings that about makes us feel less than we are. And in that, it's almost like a regression. It almost takes us back to when we were little and felt helpless and didn't know how the world worked. Or another way to say it is it just makes whatever that thing in comparison to us that seems big seem insurmountable. If that's what we're doing inside, who wouldn't feel anxious? What can bring about this situation in us? If we're trying to please others, that's an immediate setup for this. And in that, we often learn this when we're little. Again, when everybody around us seemed quite big and we relatively small. They seemed to know what was going on, and we certainly didn't. And they had a lot of rules about how we were supposed to be, and we didn't know what those were, or we weren't good at fulfilling those rules, or we didn't have any interest in fulfilling those rules. And then we would get criticized or punished or in some way reacted to. And that made us feel bad about ourselves and small. So often this is where we learned it. Does that mean we have to go back and sort of psychoanalytically figure out all those things that happened in our childhood in order to overcome this? Here at Learn to Learn, we don't think so. I mean, it's one way to do it, but it's often very slow and often not successful. And the result of it is our brain learned a way to think about the world and to think about ourselves. So what if we change that? If we're seeing people out there or the tasks that we're trying to do or the test that we have coming up as bigger than us and obviously us smaller, what if we think about that as though we're on a teeter-totter and that out there, just due to the weight of it or for whatever reason you imagine, that sinks down and lifts you up. So you end up being above it, bigger than the thing that makes you anxious. So with just this simple experiment, this simple technique, what happens to your experience of the thing that before made you anxious, now that you're bigger than or above? Most commonly, people will say, wow, that's really weird, but it changed it. I have a different perspective on it. I have a different way of viewing it and a different way of thinking about myself. And in being bigger, I start to have more recognition of who we are and what we're capable of. This doesn't work for everybody, but it does often make quite a difference. Another fun experiment to do is when we're thinking about that thing that makes us anxious, that seems to be above us or bigger than us, what happens if we, in a sense, imagine letting the air out of it? Some people say they stick a pin in it and it kind of deflates. And in that, we have a bigger sense of ourselves. If you try this with something that in the past has made you anxious, what changes? What freedom does this give you? What does this allow to happen? Now let's come at this in a very different way. If we think about what makes us anxious, so often it makes us anxious because we don't know how it's going to work out. Instead of putting our attention on that, instead of running that worry, that negative thought through our brain over and over about, well, what if this happens or what if that doesn't happen? What if we imagine the ideal outcome? What if we think about if everything went the way we want, what would happen in that ideal future? And as we see ourselves out there in that possible future, and we see ourselves having that look of success or that glow of pride that comes with, I did it, I got it right. When we look at that us out there, what do you see? What's that like to see that possible future? And then what happens when you step into that you? Stepping in is very different than just looking at. It really means we step into those feelings. We feel our feet on the ground in that experience. We feel that, we sense that glow, that sense of pride, that sense of looking down and seeing, the A on the paper that we just got back, or the A at the end of the semester, or the notice that we aced the interview and that we're being hired, or whatever it is. We really fill up with that experience, and we notice how other people see us being that successful, getting that outcome. And we take in their admiration for us or their appreciation for what we've just done. We really fill up on this, and we look back at today and we see what we did to get here. And we appreciate that we did it, that we found our way through what had seemed to be the obstacle and had accomplished what it was that we set out to accomplish. So being in the experience, looking back, all of this, filling up with that feeling, bring that back to today. And do that as many times as it takes to really fill up today with that sense of eventual accomplishment. What happens in you when you do this? What happens to the anxiety? So let's approach it one other way. This is pertinent to people that sort of build on their anxiety. What happens with some people is they'll feel a little bit of anxiety and the adrenaline will kick up in response to that. That fight or flight will hit a bit and the adrenaline will come up and they'll feel that rush of adrenaline and they'll go, oh my gosh, I'm having anxiety. And then they amplify it because they interpret the adrenaline as bad and something to be avoided, rather than just the body having preparation energy, rather than the body preparing to do whatever it is that's there to do. Then they react to that adrenaline and amplify it. They go, again, oh my gosh, I'm starting to feel anxious, and that will trigger more adrenaline dump, and that feeling that comes with that, they'll again react to and sort of build on that. And some people can keep that going for minutes, hours, days. But if we stop and go, oh, wait a minute, this is just adrenaline. This is just what the body does to try and prepare to deal with something. And that sensation will ease in a little bit. The body will use up the adrenaline and things will relax and wind down. So if we think about times where we've done that before, and early on, rather than amplifying, we go, oh, this is normal. This is natural. Of course, if I think about that test or that interview or whatever it is that particular way, of course the body is going to begin releasing some adrenaline just to prepare. Totally natural. Nothing to be concerned about. This will pass. When you replay it this way, what changes? What changes when you already imagine yourself doing this in the future? Just another way to deal with anxiety. There are many more approaches that are for different people required. Oftentimes, anxiety is a result of negative beliefs about ourselves, limiting beliefs about ourselves. Well, in our podcasts, we deal with all of these. We're at learntolearn.org, learn-to-learn.org. Come there and check out our podcast. We have ones on every phase of this. How to, in much more detail, how to overcome overwhelm, how to overcome a variety of beliefs, how to motivate ourselves, and so on. So please come check us out. Like us here if you would. Tell your friends. We're doing all of this for no benefit to ourselves. We just want to make a difference. We want to be here to support you in becoming that amazing being that you can be. Thanks for joining us.